when you do the green screen, you kind of, your image gets all cut up, but it's not getting cut up anymore.
I've got a new camera. I've got a better lighting. Yeah, I've upgraded my whole setup.
Okay.
I think we're live now. So Prana Prabhu is going to share some Gora Katha with us.
Okay. Hare
Get
Krishna.
the notifications going.
Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So last week we were reading from the ecstatic dancing of the Lord at the Rath Yatra festival, and we heard how King Prataparudra, reciting the Tavakatamritam verse from the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, finally achieved the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But it wasn't because of his chanting of the verse, Tavakatamritam verse, it was because he swept the road in front of Lord Jagannath. And this is a really essential point and an important point for us to meditate upon, is that the bhakti is received from performance of bhakti. We get association of the devotees by the mercy of the Lord, and the Lord, and by the mercy of the Vaishnavas, we get the connection with Krishna. And that is through Sangha, Sadhu Sangha, and ultimately through Seva. Eyabilasi Dio Kodo Nija Dasi, that we pray every day to Shrimati Tulsi Devi that we get the mercy of service. Please give me the privilege of devotional service, and make me your own maid servant. So that's the goal of our bhakti. The goal of our bhakti is to become a servant of the servant. And I quoted that verse from King Kulashekara from the Mukunda Mala Stotram, that stated that the perfection of his birth would be when Krishna or Mukunda, the giver of liberation, would consider him to be the Svabritya Brita Paricharati Britya Britya, the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant. I just check in to see if I'm being heard. Can you hear me, Arjuna? Anybody there? I don't see any response. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. It's coming through on YouTube. I was tuning in.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that is the perfection of our bhakti, that we become the servant of the Lord. And that's how King Prataparudra Maharaj got the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at the conclusion of that previous section. Tonight we want to, or will attempt to read two sections of this chapter. This chapter's the Lord dancing. Oh, hang on. I'm in the wrong chapter, I think. Performance. Yeah, Performance of Vrindavan. We're in the 14th chapter. Sorry, I've gone from one Zoom to another Zoom today. I'm a bit zoomed out. But let me zoom in here to the 14th chapter of Madhya Lila. And anyway, that was a good reconnect. And we're on text number 23. Okay, so here we are in the gardens of Jagannath Puri. It was stated that around the Gundicha temple, where Lord Chaitanya, where Jagannath performs his Vrindavan Lila, his Vrindavan pastimes in the Rath Yatra, there are many gardens, beautiful gardens with lakes and lotuses and all sorts of auspicious birds and pleasant breezes and shade from the trees, so that the devotees who are dancing, and particularly at that time of the year, the Rath Yatra, it's extremely hot in Jagannath Puri, and when it rains on Rath Yatra, it's considered to be great mercy of the demigods that they're raining down on the cart and raining down on the devotees who are sweating. And sometimes you'll see in the video footage coverage, live coverage of the Rath Yatra in Puri, there are devotees who go around with water squirters and massive blasters, water blasters, and just spray water out there like through fire hydrant hoses across the crowds because it's incredibly hot, 40 degrees plus. So they go into the gardens after dancing ecstatically for hours and hours on end. They go into the gardens and they enjoy a feast and sit down and lie down and rest under the trees and go back for the evening procession. So now we're in the Lord King Pratap Maharaj has taken his leave from the devotees, submissively offering prayers to the devotees with folded hands, and offering obeisances to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The king went outside. After this, Vaninatha Roy brought all kinds of prasadam, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted lunch with the devotees. So I didn't mention the two sections that I wanted to cover tonight in this chapter, the performance of the Vrindavan pastimes. One of them is this meditation, or this important point of prasadam, and how essential, how integral prasadam is to the whole process of bhakti, and in our Panchanga bhakti, and developing the culture of Sankirtan Yoga. And if we go on from there, we'll go to a pastime where Lord Chaitanya is interacting with Jagannath once again, and he'll display his mystical potencies in a different way than he did when he was expanding himself in the different kirtan parties. So two topics we want to cover tonight: prasadam and the mystical pastimes of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and reciprocating with Lord Jagannath. The prasadam was sent by the king, had been offered at Balagandi festival, and included uncooked milk products and fruits. It was all the finest quality, and there was no end to the variety. And this is incredible. I mean, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami must have been an amazing, culinary expert, because he was able to describe in detail so many preparations, varieties of preparations that we would never even heard of or considered. And let's hear some of those preparations. Some of them are standard, but some of them are very exotic and an incredible mixture of tastes. There were curd, fruit juice, coconut, mango, dried coconut, jackfruit, various kinds of bananas, and palm fruit seeds. All of this was first offered to Lord Jagannath. There were also oranges, grapefruit, tangerines, almonds, dried fruit, raisins, and dates. There were hundreds of different types of sweetmeats, like Manohara Laddu. Manohara Laddu means it's a laddu that takes away your mind. It steals the mind. Sweets like Amrita Guttika and various types of condensed milk. There were also papayas and Saravati, a type of orange, and also crushed squash. There were also regular cream, fried cream, and a type of puri made with cream. I wonder if that fried cream is misti doi, because I know that misti doi, that sweet yogurt preparation, particularly that's common in Mayapur and Navadvip, is it's fried in an oven. It's not fried; it's baked, I think, and the top of it becomes crispy. There were also sweets known as harivalabha, and sweets made of senoti flowers, kapura flowers, and malati flowers. Amazing, huh? You can eat these flowers, sweets made from them. There were pomegranates, sweets made with black pepper, sweets made with fused sugar, and amriti jilipi. There were lotus flower sugar, a kind of bread made from urda, crispy sweetmeats, sugar candy, fried rice sweets, sesame seed sweets, and cookies made from sesame seeds. There were sugar candy sweetmeats formed into shape of orange, lemon, and mango trees, and arranged with fruits, flowers, and leaves. Sometimes you see at these food festivals some incredible sculpted foods. We went to a festival in Malaysia one time, and they were demonstrating different food art. It was quite incredible. And here you can see that this was also being presented to Lord Chaitanya and Jagannath Puri. Candy sweets formed into the shape of orange, lemon, and mango trees. There were yogurt, milk, buttermilk, fruit juice, a preparation made of fried yogurt and sugar candy. Maybe that was the Mr. Doi. And salty mung dal sprouts with shredded ginger. There were also various types of pickles, lemon pickle, berry pickle, and so on. Indeed, I'm not able to describe the variety of food offered to Lord Jagannath. In verses 26 to 34, the ones we've just read, the author describes the various foods offered to Lord Jagannath. He has described them as far as possible, but he finally admits his inability to describe them completely. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw half of the garden filled with a variety prasadam, he was very satisfied. Half of the garden. You can imagine there would have been hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of clay pots, like traditional clay pots in Jagannath Puri that we still see today. And even today, the thousands and thousands of pots are produced from those hundreds and hundreds of stoves that are prepared for Lord Jagannath every day for his offering. And that is what a meditation that I wanted to share with you tonight, that the Sankirtan Yagya that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has inaugurated, it's very much around, as Prabhupada said, dancing and chanting and feasting. And it was really from day one of ISKCON, prasadam played such an important role, and it would be, we should not underplay or minimize the role that prasadam plays in the Sankirtan Yagya, because it's what really keeps the army marching, the prasadam, and it's not just the food. And we'll talk a little bit about the early days in 26 Second Avenue and Srila Prabhupada here in Australia, some of the prasadam pastimes that he had with the devotees. And we see from them, the lesson that we can derive from them is how important prasadam is, and the difference between prasadam and food that is just not offered to God. Because I think it was Hayagriva and maybe Chutananda, they'd been to India before, Wally and Howard and all Chuck and all these different characters that from the 26 Second Avenue. A couple of them had been to India, and they had tasted similar food that the Swamiji was cooking, but they'd never tasted anything quite like what he cooked. Prabhupada was an expert cook, but he would offer everything to Krishna in the bell ceremony in the temple, and they would bring everything down in front of the picture of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and offer it. And then it would be distributed to the devotees in Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada would distribute it himself, the prasadam, cook the prasadam and distribute the prasadam and make sure the devotees were fully satisfied with Bhagavat Prasad. Indeed, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was fully satisfied just to see how Lord Jagannath accepted all the food. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's various descriptions of the intricacies of Lord Chaitanya's, of Jagannath's, and of Krishna's mercy when he touches the food, how it becomes transformed into spiritual food, how it's not different, it's completely different to ordinary food because it's been tasted by the saliva of Krishna himself, and it comes back in this very sweet form. And I think everybody's experienced that who's a devotee today in ISKCON, that having tasted that first morsel of prasadam, it's a very memorable trigger, and sometimes it's something that keeps us in Krishna consciousness, just remembering how potent that is. I remember my first morsel of prasadam was in a university, in a lecture hall. It was in an evening lecture, and my Avatmana Pradaksha Guru, the devotee who brought me to Krishna consciousness, who wasn't in Krishna consciousness, and he had a very short spell with the devotees, helping making it the Rath cart when Prabhupada came to Melbourne. He gave me a plate of prasadam, cold prasadam. The devotees had been at the temple on campus at the university on the campus for the vegetarian program on the Monday morning. And I wasn't in the club at the time, and he gave me this plate of prasadam. It was on a polystyrene plate, a white polystyrene plate with a lid on it. So 2 polystyrene plates and this plate of prasadam. It had cold rice and cold dal and a cold pumpkin sabji and cold halava with custard on top. So it was 3 or 4 hours cold after being served. And I tasted, and I wasn't fond of pumpkin in those days, and I tasted a little bit of the sabji, and I kind of didn't know what to make of it. But it was such an extraordinary taste. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It wasn't like any pumpkin I'd ever had. And even though it was cold, it was something that was really kind of mesmerized me. And it was interesting because he gave it to me in the back of this lecture hall, and there was 500 students in this lecture hall. And one of our tutors was sitting next to us, so that the main lecturer is at the front and he's giving the big lecture. And then you have your tutors, and we always sneak in the back. And the tutor was sitting next to us, and he looked over and he said, "Oh, you brought prasadam." I didn't know what prasadam was. He said to my friend, "You brought prasadam, share it with me." So the tutor ended up having most of that plate of prasadam in the back of the lecture hall. That was my first experience. And then we had many other memorable experiences of overdosing on prasadam in Crossways down in Elizabeth Street in Melbourne, and going back to sleep in lectures in the afternoon. So prasadam is such an incredible experience for first timers, and an incredible meditation for devotees after their years and years of honoring prasadam. And of course, many of us in our later years in Krishna consciousness, after many years of plates of halva and cauliflower pakoras and chutneys, not able to eat like that anymore, but we're still able to relish to see young devotees eating Krishna prasadam, especially for the first time, and becoming free from their materialistic life, because that's what the prasadam does. Prabhupada says, following the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a Vaishnava should be fully satisfied simply to see a variety of food offered to the deity of Jagannath or Radha Krishna. A Vaishnava should not hunger for a variety of food for his own sake. Rather, his satisfaction is in seeing various foods being offered to the deity. In his Guru Vastakam, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, Chatu Vidhav Sri Bhagavat Prasada, Swadana Triptam Hari Bhakta Sangam, Kritvaiva Triptim Bhajata Sadaiva, Vande Guru Sri Charanaravinda. This is a really important verse. And all of the Guru Vastakam prayers are such an important meditation for us. And I've been meditating on these verses recently, and I was so happy to see this verse pop up in the purport, so that perhaps we can talk a little bit about this verse and the importance of the Bhagavat Prasad. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzed as that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasad, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master's duty is to engage his disciples in preparing varieties of nice foods to offer to the deity. After being offered, the food is distributed as prasadam to the devotees. These activities satisfy the spiritual master, although he himself does not eat or require such a variety of prasadam. By seeing to the offering and distribution of prasadam, he himself is encouraged in devotional service. I think many things that can be said here. One of them is Srila Prabhupada's focus on prasadam from the first days in ISKCON, and not even from 22nd Avenue, from Butler, Pennsylvania. When Prabhupada was staying at the Agarwals, what did he do? He daily walked from the YMCA 6 or 7 blocks to the house of Gopal and Sally Agarwal to cook He got there for breakfast, 7 o'clock, and at 9 o'clock, he started cooking on his 3-tier cooker, and he cooked for the family. And Sally Agarwal recollects Prabhupada's stay with her for that 1 month in Butler. And she has such an amazing connection with Srila Prabhupada, and such an amazing appreciation and acknowledgement of Prabhupada's unique position, but in a very personal and a very, in a very uncontentious way. She had no airs about her. She's not like a senior devotee or anything. She's a person who connected with Prabhupada on that real level, personal level, and Prabhupada connected with the family as a guest in their house, and he reciprocated with them by cooking for them. Imagine Prabhupada cooked every day for 1 month. He cooked their midday lunch, and she tells how Prabhupada cooked the chapatis with his hand without a rolling pin. He just he would form the chapatis, the dough in between his palms, and cook them and puff them up on the flame, and they would enjoy a feast every day of chapatis, sabji, rice, and dal cooked by Srila Prabhupada. And that wasn't the end of Prabhupada's cooking, of course. That was the start of Prabhupada cooking. He cooked on the boat, on the Jaladuta, because he understood the importance of prasadam, and how important it is that we only take Krishna prasadam. And in Prabhupada's commentaries in the Nectar of Instruction, for example, we read how important it is to not take the food that's cooked and offered by non-devotees to us, because that food becomes, the consciousness is infused into the food, into the way the food is purchased, where it's purchased, where it's stored, how it's prepared, how it's cooked, how it's distributed, and that consciousness is very much pervasive in the food. And devotees have such a different relationship with food, the way they purchase food and the way they store food and the way that they prepare food and present food and cook it and offer the food and distribute the prasadam. It's quite an art in itself, and it's something it's a part of our culture, that food. It's very much not a fast food culture. Krishna consciousness, Sankirtan Yagya, is a culture, a deep culture, rich culture, and a culture that is something that is developed over generations and through generations and generations and generations for thousands of years, you can say, through the pastimes of Lord Jagannath. We're receiving these preparations and this process of Bhagavat Prasad is coming in disciplic succession. It's part of the parampara that we're receiving, this incredible process of prasadam, receiving prasadam, bhunte bhojayate chaiva, cooking prasadam and distributing prasadam and receiving prasadam from others. And therefore it's really encouraged for householders who are not in lockdown. We've just gone back into a 6-week lockdown, but I've been meditating on this. But when the 6 weeks is over, that we again engage in receiving devotees and going to devotees' houses and taking prasadam, because it's such an exchange, it's such an exchange of love, a loving exchange, and that consciousness our consciousness becomes enhanced through that process of sadhu sangha. And Prabhupada really instigated this and institutionalized it. Sometimes it's said that you can't institutionalize bhakti. I had a lecturer at university who was very familiar with Krishna consciousness, and he was a close associate or friend of the devotees of Burijan Prabhu and Aniruddha Prabhu here in Melbourne. He wrote the foreword for Prabhupada, for Burijan Prabhu's book, The Art of Teaching. Anyway, this lecturer of mine at the university, he said to me one time that you can't institutionalize bhakti. Bhakti is something that can't be contained within the canon of law of an institution. Bhakti is free form. Bhakti is from the heart. Bhakti it's spontaneous. So it can't be regulated and it can't be institutionalized. And many people have said this, and that's coming from an academic perspective, but you'll hear that also from many devotional circles, that the institution is not important, that we're not about temples, but we're about cultivation of our internal bhakti and our internal bhajan, as bhajanandis. But Prabhupada successfully and masterfully institutionalized these subtle aspects of the culture so that devotees could come together and share Krishna consciousness with themselves, and they could take that mercy and share that with others, share that with society. So it was a twofold process. It was to provide that interaction for the devotees, that connection with the devotees of the Sangha, and it was to provide a place where that mercy could be distributed from, and devotees could be trained up in that culture of Krishna consciousness and take that into their homes and take that into their communities, wherever they may end up. So Prabhupada, in the very first days, we know that the devotees, the very close devotees with Prabhupada, I mean the very earliest devotees with Prabhupada that we hear from the Prabhupada Lilamrita, and Mukunda Maharaj's book and Shyamasundar Prabhu's book and all the early recollections of Prabhupada, is how personally connected Prabhupada was with the devotees in very intimately. And it was a very male-dominated temple, the 26 Second Avenue, mostly men. You read the list of names, and they're mostly men, except for Janaki, Jan, and Yamuna, and Malati. But most of the devotees are listed in the early days, and they were in Prabhupada's room, and they would Prabhupada would cook for them, and then offer that prasadam to the picture of Lord Chaitanya, and they would watch him in this bells ceremony. And that was the first deity worship in ISKCON, was the bells. The devotees, I was talking today with Giridhari Swami, and he said devotees didn't know what bells, what arti was, but it was referred to as bells. I mean, when the bells were ringing, the devotees became meditative. The devotees stopped doing different things, and they started to focus on what was happening. And of course, it signified that it was nearly time for lunch, and so many people would start to come into the storefront, fill up the storefront, and go up to Prabhupada's rooms. And Prabhupada would distribute the prasadam. He'd cook the prasadam and distribute the prasadam. And later he trained up Kirtananda how to cook the rice and the dal. And Satsrit Maharaj has that beautiful description of the devotees looking into the kitchenette and waiting for the big final scenario, the ultimate, the chaunce, great scenario, what do you call it, the final scenario. So it would explode, the chaunce would explode, and then the devotees would know it's time for prasadam. And Prabhupada had instigated this, and he taught him how to cook. And there's a beautiful description of the wedding of Mukunda Maharaj and Janaki, how Prabhupada invited so many guests, and he cooked, and Yamuna came. That was the first time Yamuna met Srila Prabhupada. She traveled, across the US to New York, and she met Srila Prabhupada for the very first time, and Prabhupada trained her from day one in the art of cooking, in the art of Vaishnava cooking, and in very particular about the way she was presenting herself, and where she would place her hands, and how to clean, and how to prepare, and how to cut, and how to fold the pastries, and how to spice different things. And for that, Yamuna became a lifelong authority on Vedic cuisine, and she produced a gold star standard cookbook on Vedic cooking, because she was empowered by Srila Prabhupada to cook. And Prabhupada had seen in her this capacity, or this propensity on the first day of meeting, that she had this propensity and ability to cook, to learn this ancient Vedic art of cooking. And so she went on to become an amazing cook and an incredible devotee. And here in Melbourne, Korma Prabhu, he recollects in his book, The Great Transcendental Adventure, how Srila Prabhupada, for that famous 9 o'clock offering that Korma cooked, and Prabhupada had trained the devotees here in Melbourne how to cook these 3 sabjis, and they were very rich sabjis, and they still cook them today. 3 very rich sabjis cooked in ghee, and there with puris, and we serve it with a kind of a besan sweet, like I call it laddu, but it's not a round ball. It's just these cut up pieces of laddu besan, and very, very rich offering, and milk, hot milk, 3 sabjis and puris. And Prabhupada trained them how to cook those, and then one night Prabhupada saw the 9 o'clock offering going up, and it's an amazing room. Prabhupada's house, it's called Prabhupada House. It's a heritage home in South Melbourne, in Albert Park in South Melbourne, and it's quite an affluent area. So it's a very big house. Prabhupada's rooms upstairs, up the red stairs, and the kitchen was down the stairs and down a corridor. And in very tiny little kitchen, many years of devotional offerings were produced in there, in that yagya shala of the kitchen. Anyway, Prabhupada saw the plates coming back from the altar. They come back from the altar and they come into the house. So the Prabhupada house was separated from the other building, which is the temple. And so as it was going by, Prabhupada asked to have a look, to see the prasadam, and he wanted to honor it. And he honored the sabji with the puri. And he noted that the puri was perfectly round, like a balloon, still after it had been offered for so long. It was still round like a balloon, and beautiful color, translucent color. And Prabhupada tapped it with his finger and deflated it and put some sabji in, and took some sabji. And he asked who cooked this prasadam, who cooked the puris, and they told Shruti Kirti told Prabhupada this was cooked by Kormadas, and so he said, yes, he's following the principles. Now, when I heard that first, for years, I thought he meant he's following the 4 Rigata principles. But Prabhupada Kormaprabhu mentioned recently on an interview that Prabhupada was referring to principles of cooking. That yes, he follows the Korma's understanding and follows the principles of cooking, and from that Korma became an amazing chef, a world-renowned chef, and he went on to become, his whole career in devotional life was centered around prasadam. And those of you who have been involved with Korma Prabhu or been to the Melbourne Temple will understand the influence that he had there and the standard that he set there for prasadam that is still very much a part of the temple today. And that prasadam culture is it's so ingrained in our main temples in ISKCON that it's part of something that we identify as ISKCON, and that is something that we should not minimize ever, and to think that or talk about the prasadam as being too rich, or the prasadam's not good for you, it's not healthy. But the prasadam, Lord Chaitanya, we just read the list of things that Lord Chaitanya can eat. And we're not Lord Chaitanya. We don't have a transcendental body, of course, or thousands of his associates. But nevertheless, the original cooking, the preparations, and what Krishna really enjoys to eat is something really special. And it's something that we have Prabhupada institutionalized in his Rajabhog offerings, and in all the offerings, breakfast offering, even the evening offering, three ghee sabjis, and the puris. One interesting little side here is that when I was I was getting some treatment in an Ayurvedic clinic in Malaysia, the Ayurvedic clinic, the standard for all of the food, there was like 6 times you would eat food during the day, because food was part of the medicine. They say the food is the medicine in Ayurveda. And very interestingly, that the food was very similar to Prabhupada's diet. It was almost identical to Prabhupada's standard ISKCON meals and timings. So the breakfast was, around about 8 o'clock in the morning. And then after that, we had a mid-morning sort of soup thing. And then the main meal at 1 o'clock at the same time that Prabhupada instigated it. And that meal was very similar to the same meal that you would see on a Rajabhog, the rice and the dal and the chapatis, and with a few little condiments. And then in the evening, another kind of different meal, and then a fruits at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, same as that we have in the temple. So there's a system behind that. It's not just, once again, what Prabhupada has given to us is not something which is just random, that Prabhupada thought might be a good idea, or these might be some good preps, or this might be a good way to do the deity worship. But it's something that is very much historically part of Krishna consciousness, and we are inheriting this culture, and we have the kind of responsibility as caretakers of the culture to develop the culture and to maintain that culture and to pass that culture on to our children, and to pass that culture on to all the people that come to Krishna consciousness in the future, and will continue to maintain the essence of Krishna consciousness through the purity of the transmission of the culture. So there's many things we could say about prasadam, I guess, but the essence here is that the spiritual master becomes satisfied when he sees the devotees are satisfied. Svadana Tritam, Hari Bhakta Sangam. When the devotees are satisfied by taking Bhagavat Prasad, then the spiritual master becomes satisfied. And we become satisfied. When we're serving, we don't feel hunger anymore. When we serve the devotees, it's amazing how you can serve after fasting, you can serve, and then you feel very content at the end of it, and you don't even have to eat so much, because there's been some kind of a mystical transformation of the bile and the juices in the stomach, and the messages going to the mind, that we are satisfied by distributing Krishna prasadam. Then there then arrived 5 or 7 loads of plates made of the leaves of ketaki tree. Each man was supplied 10 of these plates, and in this way the leaf dishes were distributed. So they're going to eat a lot of prasadam. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu understood the labor of all the kirtan chanters. Therefore, he was very eager to feed them sumptuously. All the devotees sat down in lines, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu personally began to distribute the prasadam. That's another aspect of prasadam, distribution. And many times in our temples, we become a little bit lax, and we think, oh, just, a guest comes and we're eating prasadam, we say, get it yourself. We sit there, we don't want to get disturbed, so just get it yourself. Oh, there's no plate. Oh, well, you didn't bring a plate, or too bad, So we really have to be prepared to greet people and to acknowledge guests when they come, and particularly follow Prabhupada's standard that we always have prasadam for them, and we go out of our way to give them prasadam and to feed them sumptuously. And we sit down in lines. That's something that's really systematic. We sit down in lines. It makes it systematic, and it makes it practical, so people can get up and they can leave. If everybody's sitting everywhere, then it's difficult to get up and to move around, and you're stepping over people, stepping over prasadam. But if everybody's in lines, like in the prasadam hall, in the Gauta building, in Mayapur, you just see these incredible lines, and they have those nice platforms, molded platforms where you sit behind, and they have sittings. So 1,000 people at a time could sit in there, and then move them out, and then wash it down, squeegee it out, and then sit down again. That's the system for taking prasadam, to sit down in lines. When the devotees were in Surat, there's an amazing pastime of Prabhupada went to Surat in Gujarat with 30 devotees in 1970, I think, or 71. We've just done all this Prabhupada research for our Prabhupada unit in Bhakti Learning, and came out, we discovered some amazing facts and information. And one of them was one of the incredible pieces of facts that we discovered was that the devotees would eat prasadam every day, their lunchtime prasadam, every day with Prabhupada in this house of Mr. Jariwala. And he and his family set the devotees down in rows. And there's a beautiful picture of this. And they're sitting in rows, 15 on each side, and Prabhupada's sitting at the top, at the head of the table. So they're all sitting on the floor, and Prabhupada's sitting on a table, and they would serve Prabhupada the preps and then go up and down the rows and serve the devotees. And Prabhupada was very much, conscious about who was eating what and how much they had, and he was making sure that all the devotees were satisfied. And the devotees felt so much, so connected with Srila Prabhupada, because they sat down and ate with him, ate with their spiritual master. in a very intimate setting for 1 week, I think it was, in Surat or more. And even Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was very sick in his final days in Vrindavan, he asked Bhakti Maharaj to find out what the devotees were eating, to see if the devotees were satisfied, and to find out what the standard of prasadam was in the temple. And he wasn't satisfied when Bhakti Maharaj came back, and Bhakti Maharaj reported that Prabhupada, the prasadam is not very good. It's not very good quality. The standard is not very good. Prabhupada asked for the managers to be brought in and to ask them to improve the quality of the prasadam so that the devotees would be satisfied and they wouldn't go outside and they'll be healthy. So that's another little add-on for the devotees sitting in lines and having some system for the distribution of the prasadam. But the devotees would not accept the prasadam until Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took it. Sarup Goswami informed the Lord of this. Sarup Damodar said, "My Lord, please sit down. No one will eat until you do." At that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down with his personal associates and had every one of them fed very sumptuously until they were filled to their necks. The Bengali here is Akanta Puriya, filled up to their necks. And Prabhupada, the descriptions of Prabhupada in 26 Second Avenue are very much like that. And there's a funny pastime of a devotee. His mother had asked Prabhupada to look after him. Prabhupada said, if he personally takes care of this boy, I forget his name, if he personally takes care of this boy, then can he stay in the ashram? And his mother agreed. So he was a young boy. Not sure if he got initiated, but Prabhupada would feed them, and he would always make sure that this young boy was properly fed and looked after and everything like that, that his personal requirements were taken care of. And then eventually the young boy, Prabhupada would feed him 2 chapatis, 4 chapatis, 6 chapatis, and just keep feeding him. And then it got to 10, and Prabhupada said, okay, 10's the limit. So 10 became the limit for the chapatis in the 26 Second Avenue. But the devotees, many of the devotees in the Remembering Srila Prabhupada series will recollect how Prabhupada would encourage them to eat more and more and more. Following the orders of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Govinda, his personal servant, called for all the poor beggars who were unhappy due to their poverty and fed them sumptuously. Observing the beggars eating prasadam, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chanted Hari Bol and instructed them to chant the holy name of the Lord. In a song, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur chants, Michi Mayara Vashe Yache Beshe Kacha Habu Duba Bhai Jiva Krishna Das E Vishwas Karle Ta Ara Dukanai. O people, why are you being captivated by the waves of the ocean of nescience? If you would immediately accept Lord Krishna as your eternal master, there would be no chance of being carried away by the waves of illusion. Then all of your sufferings would stop. Krishna conducts the material world under the 3 modes of material nature, and consequently there are 3 platforms of life, higher, middle, and lower. On whatever platform one may be situated, one is tossed by the waves of material nature. Someone may be rich, someone may be middle class, and someone may be a poor beggar. It doesn't matter. As long as one is under the spell of the 3 modes of material nature, he must continue to experience the 3 divisions. And then Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita, Namchayo Vyabhichadina, that we become free from the modes of material nature by doing bhakti. Sagunan Samatityatam, we become free from the gunas by engaging in bhakti. Bhakti yogena sevate. So Prabhupada's saying here that Lord Chaitanya becomes pleased and he encouraged the beggars to take prasadam. And while they're taking, as soon as the beggars chanted the holy name, Haribo, they were immediately absorbed in ecstatic love of Godhead. In this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu performed wonderful pastimes. This is another exhibition of the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, that everybody has access to the mercy of the Lord, and everybody has access to Mahaprasadam, and everybody, and it has the same potency on everybody, whether you're a rich person, a middle-class person, or a beggar. Anybody who comes in touch with the Mahaprasadam becomes liberated. And here it says that they chanted Hari Bol, they were immediately absorbed in ecstatic love of Godhead. Of course, they got the message, they got the instruction from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. and it was distributed. The prasadam was distributed under his order, so it had that potency. I remember when we were living in Mumbai, we would have programs, prasadam programs. We would have preaching programs, like Namahat programs in different houses, and prasadam was a big feature of them, of course. And that sometimes we'd overcook, and there would be so much prasadam left over. And particularly in this one particular area where we went to, whenever we overcooked, and we always overcooked in that area, then we would distribute to the local people. So we'd go outside of the apartment building, go downstairs, and somebody would run into the slum. There was a slum close by there, and would call the people up. And you don't have to wait for very long in these circumstances for people to be lining up for prasadam. So they would call the people up, sort of just bang the pots and call them up, and they would all come with their plates and tiffins and anything they could get, relief plates, whatever they could get their hand on to get prasadam. And we would feed like dozens and dozens of these people that would come. They just kept coming and coming and coming until the prasadam was finished. And when it was finished, they wouldn't come anymore. That the message was out that the prasadam's over. So it's unlimited who can get the mercy, and prasadam shouldn't be wasted. We may overcook, but we can always distribute the prasadam. But if we can't distribute it to human beings, we can go somewhere and distribute it to living entities. Go to the beach and give it to the seagulls, or go into the park and give it to the birds, or put it in the back of in the garden for the insects, or somewhere. But we don't never throw prasadam out, because it's the mercy of the Lord, and it's has this incredible potency. Outside the garden, when it was time to pull Jagannath's car, all the workers called Gautas tried to pull it, but it would not move forward. This is the second part of tonight's presentation. We'll just briefly touch on this, and we'll finish up. When the Gautas saw that they could not budge the car, they abandoned the attempt. Then the king arrived in great anxiety, and he was accompanied by his officers and friends. The king then arranged for big wrestlers to try to pull the car, and even the king himself joined in, but the car could not be moved. Becoming even more anxious to move the car, the king had very strong elephants brought forth and harnessed to it. The strong elephants pulled with all their strength, but still the car remained at a standstill, not budging an inch. They're the Mata Hastigana, strongest elephants. As soon as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this news, he went there with all his personal associates. They then stood there and watched the elephants trying to pull the car. The elephants, being beaten by the elephant goad, were crying, but still the car would not move. The assembled people cried out, "Alas!" At that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu let all the elephants go free and placed the car's ropes in the hands of his own men. "Here, take over. Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan army are here, and they're going to move this cart." Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then went to the back of the car and began to push with his head. It was then that the car began to move and roll along, making a rattling sound. Indeed, the car began to move automatically, and the devotees simply carried the ropes in their hands. Since it was moving effortlessly, they did not need to pull it. So the rope, they were just carrying the rope. They weren't pulling the cart with the rope. When the car moved forward, everyone began to chant with great pleasure, "All glories, all glories, all glories to Jagannath, Jai Jagannath." No one could hear anything else. In a moment, the car reached the door of Gundicha temple. Upon seeing the uncommon strength of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the people were struck with wonder. The crowd made a tumultuous vibration, chanting, "Jai Gaura Chandra, Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya." Then the people began to chant, "Wonderful, wonderful." Seeing the greatness of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his ministers and friends, was so moved by ecstatic love that their hair on their bodies stood on end. So Prataparujamaj and his ministers and friends, the hairs on their bodies stood on end. All the servants of Lord Jagannath then took him down from the car, and the Lord went to sit on his throne in the Gundicha temple. Subhadra and Balaram also sat on their respective thrones. There followed the bathing of Lord Jagannath, and finally the offering of food. So you can see that every aspect of festival, the Rath Yatra festival, is dynamic, and it's not static. It doesn't have a script, so to speak. It has places where they stop and they stay, and there's ritual and there's routine, but within all that, there's unlimited varieties of personal experiences and of personal interactions between the Lord and his devotees, particularly with Lord Jagannath and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was able to push the cart with his head, that the strong wrestlers and the king himself and the elephants couldn't budge. And time again, we see that Lord Jagannath, particularly in Jagannath Puri, he demonstrates his Ishvara Bhav, he demonstrates his controllership, the Purushottam Yagya, that he's the supreme Purushottama, he's the supreme Lord, the supreme personality of Godhead. One time, when the cart, Lord Jagannath's cart, we know it's got I think it's got 18 wheels, the cart of Lord Jagannath, and Balaram's might have 16, and I think Subhadра's got 12 or something like that. So they've got amazing amount of wheels on these carts. I think 16 wheels on the cart of Lord Jagannath. And one time, recently, within the last 15, 20 years, in the Rath Yatra parade, the cart of Lord Balaram's, one of the axles on one of the wheels broke. And so the cart became lopsided, even though there was many other wheels. The cart wasn't tipping, but it wouldn't move also because the axle jammed the other wheels, so they couldn't move it. And this caused a great problem for all the devotees. And it was at the beginning of the festival, and the Prime Minister had been flown in with his entourage, landed in a helicopter in Puri, and come to the parade to be at the beginning of the Rath Yatra parade. And Balaram's cart wouldn't budge. And we know that the Prime Minister has a very busy schedule, and so he was sending messages that the parade has to start, otherwise he can't stay all day. He can't stay for the next day. He's got to go. He's got an important schedule. He's got an important meeting to get to in the evening time. And anyway, the cart didn't budge, and so the Prime Minister left. He had to leave the festival and go to another engagement, and he was taken off in his helicopter, and they called in the Indian Army. So the Indian Army came in, or the Indian Air Force. Indian Air Force came in, and they brought in all this incredible technology, these fancy jacks, pneumatic jacks, and they lifted the cart, lifted the whole cart with Balaram on and everything like that. They lifted the cart, and they replaced the axle, fixed it, and then they put it down again, and the cart was ready to go. And so they had the headlines in the papers the next day that Lord Jagannath, the Prime Minister of India, is refused darshan of Lord Jagannath, but actually Lord Jagannath invited the Indian Air Force to his Rath Yatra, and the Indian Air Force became the heroes of the day. They took the position of the Prime Minister. So many times we see and hear of these different pastimes of Krishna, even modern day pastimes of Krishna, demonstrating his independence, his Swadat. Krishna is the Abhigya Swadat. He's all-knowing. He knows the heart of all living entities, and he's the emperor. He's completely independent. He's not answerable to anybody or any circumstance or anything, because he's completely he's the supreme personality of Godhead, and he likes to reciprocate in his loving relationship with the devotees in this Rath Yatra festival in Jagannath Puri, and now in the Rath Yatra festival in so many parts of the world. And I know in New Zealand they have Rath Yatra about 20 times a year, and Jagannath is continually going out of the temple and showing his mercy, or different forms of Jagannath are appearing in different parts of New Zealand, North and South Island, to give the special benediction to the conditioned souls. There's many verses that Rupa Goswami quotes, many verses in the Nectar Devotion, the Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu, to demonstrate the importance of festivals and to demonstrate the importance of following festivals and being with the Lord. It's said that in one shloka he says that those who follow behind the Lord, who go agare, in front of the Lord, behind or on the side, in the of the cart, they all become freed from their material bondage in this material world simply by being with the crowd, by moving with Lord Jagannath. We become free from our material bondage. And there are many other benedictions and blessings that we get, but one of the main things is that we get a taste for Krishna consciousness. We experience the incredible unlimited mercy of the Lord, and how the Lord gives his blessing to the conditioned souls, and how he's becoming accessible to so many people through these Ratha Yatra festivals. It's quite incredible how the influence that has had in New York City and in London and Melbourne and Auckland and Kuala Lumpur and in all the cities of India, in Chennai and Bombay and Delhi. I think in Delhi, that one year I was in Delhi, they were having something like 16 or 20 Ratha Yatras, and in each Ratha Yatra they would have hundreds and thousands of people. And they were having Ratha Yatras, every second day. They would just have them one after another. And they had a big board in the office, in the general manager's office of the temple. And there was this like unlimited Ratha Yatras happening, and he was showing how different devotees were going there, different sannyasis were going there to take care of that, and preaching and unlimited prasadam distribution. So in this way, just to recap and to bring tonight's talk to a close, that Prabhupada did successfully institutionalize Krishna Prem, Bhava Bhakti. He did institutionalize that in the sense that he provided a framework for devotees to cultivate their personal relationship with Krishna through association with the devotees, by following the direction or the orders of the spiritual master, and becoming fixed in the philosophy from the transcendental knowledge of the Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, and worshipping the deity. And by worshipping the deity, we regulate our lives. By offering the prasadam to the deities, we regulate our lives. By associating with the devotees, we regulate. That association regulates our lives. It influences our consciousness. The food that we take, the people that we associate with, directly have a direct influence on our consciousness. Prabhupada said in a purport in the first canto of the Bhagavatam that foolish people fail to understand how by association one develops qualities. And so I think that's one of the important takeaways from this section of the Chaitanya Charitamrita and from the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, is that the culture of Krishna consciousness that's been established in ISKCON by Srila Prabhupada and by his followers, and is being maintained and being developed by the devotees in ISKCON today, is coming in parampara, and it's coming. It's where it's a cultural expression of love in bhakti to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by worshiping Krishna, we have the capacity to connect with unlimited conditioned souls in the universe. So Srila Prabhupada ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Mahabhagavat Prasadam ki, Shri Jagannath Ratha Yatra ki, Go Premanandi. Hare Krishna.
Hey, Bo, thanks for that.
Hare Bo.
All right, I'll turn the stream off.
We'll see you next week.